Hello, this is R.J. Deacon reading the Supreme Court of the United States opinion syllabus in Federal Communications Commission versus PROMETHEUS Radio Project, certiorari to the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. Argued January 19th, 2021. Decided April 1st, 2021. If you'd like to support the podcast, please stay tuned to the end of the podcast. Under its broad authority to regulate broadcast media in the public interest, the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, has long maintained several ownership rules that limit the number of radio stations, television stations, and newspapers that a single entity may own in a given market. Section 202H of the Telecommunications Act of 1996 directs the FCC to review its media ownership rules every 4 years and to repeal or modify any rules that no longer serve the public interest. In 2017, the FCC concluded that 3 of its ownership rules were no longer necessary to promote competition, localism, or viewpoint diversity. The Commission further concluded that the record evidence did not suggest that repealing or modifying those 3 rules was likely to harm minority and female ownership. Based on that analysis, the agency decided to repeal 2 of those 3 ownership rules and modify the third. PROMETHEUS Radio Project, and several other public interest consumer advocacy groups, collectively Prometheus, petitioned for review, arguing that the FCC's decision to repeal or modify the 3 rules was arbitrary and capricious under the Administrative Procedure Act. The Third Circuit vacated the FCC's reconsideration order, holding that the record did not support the agency's conclusion that the rule changes would have minimal effect on minority and female ownership. The Supreme Court decision is reversed, and Justice Kavanaugh delivered the opinion. The FCC's decision to repeal or modify the 3 ownership rules was not arbitrary and capricious for purposes of the APA. In analyzing whether to repeal or modify its existing ownership rules, the FCC considered the record evidence and reasonably concluded that the 3 ownership rules at issue were no longer necessary to serve the agency's public interest goals of competition, localism, and viewpoint diversity, and that the rule changes were not likely to harm minority and female ownership. In challenging the FCC's order, Prometheus argues that the Commission's assessment of the likely impact of the rule changes on minority and female ownership rested on flawed data. But the FCC acknowledged the gaps in the data sets it relied on and noted that, despite its repeated requests for additional data, it had received no countervailing evidence suggesting that changing the ownership rules was likely to harm minority and female ownership. Prometheus also asserts that the FCC ignored 2 studies submitted by a commenter that purported to show that past relaxations of the ownership rules had led to decreases in minority and female ownership levels. But the record demonstrates that the FCC considered those studies and simply interpreted them differently. In assessing the effect of the rule changes on minority and female ownership, the FCC did not have perfect empirical or statistical data. But that is not unusual in day-to-day agency decision-making within the executive branch. The APA imposes no general obligation on agencies to conduct or commission their own empirical or statistical studies, and nothing in the Telecommunications Act required the FCC to conduct such studies before exercising its discretion under Section 202H. In light of the sparse record on minority and female ownership and the FCC's findings with respect to competition, localism, and viewpoint diversity, the Court cannot say that the agency's decision to repeal or modify the ownership rules fell outside the zone of reasonableness for purposes of the APA. The decision below is reversed. Justice Kavanaugh delivered the opinion for a unanimous court. Justice Thomas filed a concurring opinion. If you'd like to support the podcast or support me as I work my way through law school, please find the podcast on Patreon or follow the PayPal link in the show notes. If you'd like to reach me, I can be reached at roadsscholar80@gmail.com. That's ROADS, like the truck driving roads, and the number 80.